Book reviews aren't something we normally do at APA, nor do we interview the authors who write them. But we'd like to make an exception for one book that's been around for about 3 years. The title is Confessions of a Union Buster, and its author is Marty Levitt. It's this personal story about one man who made a career out of bashing unions and then had a change of heart. Marty, I'd like to thank you for being with us today. It's certainly a pleasure to have you speak to us about not only your book, but about union busting in general. Before we get started, I'd like to ask you about your personal background and how you got started in the business.
I got started in union busting really not knowing what union busting was. I responded to a classified ad for a management consultant with experience in employee relations and communications. And in the course of the interview, I was introduced to a phenomenon called preventive labor relations. And I was told that I wouldn't really be busting unions, but I would be using the threat of unions to improve the quality of work life in a workplace.
Now, what year was it that you entered the business?
This was in late 1969 that I started out in the union busting business.
And you stopped union busting in?
1987.
So in 18 years, how many campaigns did you wage?
I was directly involved in excess of 200 and indirectly probably 500 to 600.
Well, Marty, after such a long career, why did you decide to leave the business?
It caught up to me. It was just a series of personal events and a lot of awareness of the real harm and damage that I had done to the lives of good, hard-working people. And I just couldn't continue regardless of the huge amount of money that I was able to make at that field.
That was, what, some 8 years ago now?
I'm in my 9th year, actually, of being out of that field and in service to organized labor.
Earlier today, Marty gave a presentation to the Family Awareness Regional Coordinators and their spouses who were meeting in Arlington, Texas. Let's take a look at some of those clips.
Thank you. And good morning. I hope you didn't have to rehearse that applause. I am truly very honored and very privileged to be with you. I come to you from an extremely dirty business, and I suspect that 10 years ago and prior, not one of you in this room would have welcomed me into the same room, the same community, the same facility, the same anything. And yet it amazes me that I'm entering my 9th year in service to labor. Union busting is as old as unions. And when I got into it in 1969, just to give you an illustration, I was a consultant. There were less than 100 consultants nationally and probably a dozen law firms that specialized only in labor management law. There were large law firms that had labor management law departments. So there were only a few hundred practitioners, and that was rounded out to 1970. 1996, there are somewhere between 8,000 and 10,000 practitioners in this country. It is a multi-billion-dollar industry, and it's broken down into specialties. When you practice before the National Labor Relations Board or the National Mediation Board, you do not have to be an attorney. So you don't have to have a code of ethics. Labor law in this country is so weak, so antiquated, so toothless and useless that we'd probably be better off without it. And the only way to really successfully break a union in one fashion or another is to break the law. You cannot accomplish one without the other. That industry, it's an out-of-control rolling snowball that continues to grow and will continue to grow, but it's huge.
Any idea what kind of money that AMR might be expending on a campaign against not only our union, but the other two on the property as well?
Knowing the size and stature of AMR and knowing the incredible obsession to maintain control, which is the motivation behind all efforts to bust or fracture a union, I would guess that the entire process is costing the company no less than $25,000 a day, and that is for outside resources. That does not include people on the payroll that are executing many of these activities.
I'm just doing some quick math in my head here, Marty. $25,000 a day equates to $7 or $8 million a year. that the company may be spending on anti-union activities?
I'd say that that's a very realistic figure, and it may even be a lowball figure because of recent events that have occurred within AMR and their union relationships.
Marty, the pilots are in a rather unique position. We've always assumed a leadership role in the airlines, not only in American but other airlines as well. It's to the advantage of management to try to subvert that role. And one of the ways they do it is to try to make us a common denominator, equal to any other employee on the property. Have you seen this before?
Sure, I've done that, and I would package you the same way. As long as you are a union and as long as this battle is going on, I would attempt to demean you. And even though it should be obvious to most that the role of the pilot is so critical, I would attempt to package you and bring you down to the level of a janitor or the level of whatever I could to take away the importance of your role. In the 20 years that I busted unions, and I'd sit down in the client's office, usually the chairman of the board, the president, or whatever that executive committee or ownership of the company was, and I'd look for the motives in terms of union busting. You know, I'd look for bottom line or profit or cost. I'd look for all these motives. And in 99% of every company I represented, and I can say every company that my former colleagues represented, there was one word that was the motive 99 and 9/10% of the time. And what was that? Control. That's right. That's absolutely right. It's all about control. To sit and listen to them whine, it's about control. It's their ego. Because they were taught to believe that when there is a union, even a productive one, even one that is contributing to the well-being, it's a testimonial against their management ability. And it's an out-and-out attack against their control. And they worked all of their careers for that control. That control was so, obsessively important to them, that nothing else mattered. This is not about a strike. This is not about a cooling off period, which under the Railway Labor Act is nothing but cock and bull and doesn't cool anything. This is about one man's obsession. And I've seen it endlessly over the years. And I'm not trying to upset you. If anything, I'm just trying to reinforce what you probably already know. It's one man's obsession who, in spite of a board of directors, has the carte blanche to open up his war chest and spend whatever it takes for his own personal gratification.
Well, let's get a little bit closer to home and talk about AMR Corporation. Mm-hmm. Many of us feel that there is a campaign against us or against unions in general by the management on this property. And I'd like to hear what you're...
Oh, there's no doubt in my mind. In fact, I don't mean to interrupt you, but if there were not a process going on, if this were not a series of events with the intent of fracturing your union, you would already have a contract. From what I have seen of the issues, there is no reason for this impasse. There is no reason for this mediation. There is no reason for any of the steps that are going on right now other than this obsession that the chief executive has, the chairman has, to control and regain control of what he feels is a threat.
But by delaying the process, what does management have to gain?
Everything. Delay was one of my favorite tactics. It wears you down. It frustrates you. It lays the climate for the divisiveness. It frustrates people. It's, well, you know, what good is our union? You know, we've been trying to accomplish this for 2 years now and nothing's happened. It gives the employee relations function of the company the tools that they need to sell themselves as the real solution for the pilots or for the union members as opposed to the union. You have to understand that this kind of a process has been going on for quite some time. This is not new, and this is not as a direct result of your entering into negotiations in 1994. This has been going on for a number of years. This is part of an overall mentality, a mentality that's based on management's ignorance, fear, greed, and ego. And for me to be able to answer and say it's going to end at a certain point would not be fair, because it's really ongoing. And this process is going to go on and on and on until one of two things happen. Until you either concede to this obsession to weaken and fracture you and give in to management's demands, or you are successful in beating them at their own game. And the only way to do that is don't wait to play defense, which is exactly what they would like you to do. Take an offensive posture and put your position out in front of not only your membership, but in front of the public. I think what you really need to understand, and I'm certain you do, is that when this commitment was made by the management to take on the union, and I don't want to sound melodramatic, but it was a declaration of war, and there is a crisis going on. War does not have to have violence and viciousness and blood to demonstrate that it's going on. You have a disagreement. You have a disagreement that's been created through misrepresentation, through myth, through creating a perception of problems that don't exist. What I really need to say, too, is that, you can win this thing, and it's too bad that there has to be a winner and a so-called loser. But you have to keep in mind and keep focused on the fact that the war really is Bob Crandall's war. I'm not letting management off the hook. I'm not letting a lot of levels off the hook. But I think you can find that many of them will be very sympathetic to what you're doing and what you really represent, that in here they know what's going on.
When you were a union buster, what were some of the tools that you used, or the tactics you used to keep unions off the property or to weaken the union that was on the property?
It basically was all on the offensive. It was all attacking the union as being some outsider, being some foreign outside interloper that really had no real concerns about the people. It was misdefining the union. It was taking the letters U and I out of union and making the union something other than that group of people who came together to be a union. It was attack, attack, attack. I would attack from every front I could, and that is the job of the union buster. I taught management and I practiced that when you're in an endeavor to bust a union, whether it's to bust them, fracture them, weaken them, whatever the motive or goal may be, that you never defend yourself. If you could ever get me on the defensive, you'd beat my pants off. But I put so many things out there that you had to defend, that you lost sight of the real issues. I had so many things out there that you had to juggle and go chase, that the real heart and soul issues were gone.
What I'd like you to do is to paint me a picture of what would management do to destroy the union. What do you think their best ideas would be? And then what I would also like you to do is, if we were to hire you today, what would you tell me the best things we could do to beat management would be?
You have to get away from the idea that you're fighting all of management, and you have to first focus on the fact that it's Crandall, that there's a Lorenzo, there's this kind of mentality that's lost sight of reality, lost sight of real compassion for people, really lost sight of bottom line. I mean, if I understand correctly, he's saying, give me $300 million, and we can be friends and buddies, and yet the company is financially healthier than it's ever been. His behavior, he might be a very nice, charismatic person, but his attitudes towards a collective voice of people is heinous, is not what we as a society are supposed to be about. And as long as, without it sounding like mudslinging, and he and his crew of people like myself would sure attempt to do that. But if you all stayed focused, that you're not trying to bring American Airlines down, that you probably love that company more than anyone, especially more than this man at this stage, you get those points across, and you don't lose sight of that fact, that reality, that you're a union.
Marty, one of the most visible departments at American Airlines and AMR is the Employee Relations Department, and we'd like to get your views on some of their activities.
You know, for many, many years, the employee relations function in a company was nothing more than a clerical function, and most employers saw it as an unnecessary cost. Only in the last couple of decades has it come into vogue as an alternative resource for upper management, but it continues to be a nothing kind of a function. People in employee relations have no decision-making authority whatsoever. In bargaining sessions, when they go to the table, they are simply making an appearance. They are simply part of the whole delay process. They have no authority. They come in with something in a can that was probably given to them by the outside advisors, or certainly from the executive level.
How does management use the media to advance their cause?
They'll plant little seeds. They'll send out little press releases, or they'll contact an old friend from one of the networks or one of the print medias, and they'll just make a little suggestion, make a little statement that something's going on, and watch it grow. And as long as it becomes media and it gets there first, it's going to earn the credibility, and it's going to cause that other side to have to defend itself. Mr. Crandall is going to use the media and is going to turn the public against you in as many pronounced ways as possible, to divide you, to fracture you, to totally, if he can, impose on your solidarity, on your unity.
Well, you talked about what management is going to get out of this, why they're delaying the process, the negotiation process. Besides the obvious, which is saving a lot of money, what else is management getting from delaying?
They're getting self-gratification. They're getting their ego fed because they're demonstrating that they can wear you down. Time and delay always work to my advantage, and works to the advantage of anybody who is in the union-busting field. The more they can demonstrate that a union is ineffective, that they can do and dance and play any way they choose to, and time is that factor. If they can wear you down, if they can wear your union brothers down, your brethren down through time and through delay, it is one of the most common and one of the most effective tactics that are used.
As pilots, we're all concerned about job security. We're all concerned about advancement. We hear the word more airplanes, or the words more airplanes, and we all get real excited. Mm-hmm. We assume that this is also another way in which the company can get us away from the real issues.
Absolutely. In my days of practicing my dark art, or union busting, if I needed a diversion, I would find something that would make people salivate enough to draw them away from what they were really focused on. I had to do that, because if I allowed union members to stay within where they really were supposed to be, I would be defeating my own purpose in attempting to defeat that union.
Another issue that comes up often when speaking with management, particularly the CEO, revolves around downsizing the airline, the demise of American Airlines, that we're no longer going to fly airplanes if the pilots don't give management the contract that they want. And I just wondered if you'd like to comment on the chances that American Airlines may be sold off in parts or downsized.
Don't buy it. It's a pig in a poke. It doesn't exist. It's not real. From what I know, and I acknowledge that I'm an outsider to the company, it's too healthy, too well respected, and too established and successful a company. That is just blowing smoke. That's puffery and should not be bought into. It's part of the process, but it's not real.
On the other side now, let's talk about the Allied Pilots Association and the fact that we're a very strong union. We've told you that we have between 9,000 and 10,000 members. We're a voluntary union. We have a 99% membership base. And probably one of the most important messages that you could give to the members of our union would be what?
That the company is very threatened by your unity. They're very threatened by your solidarity. It's the one thing that you have that as long as it maintains itself, they cannot put a dent in. And every effort, every dollar that is being spent now is being spent not only to attempt to regain that control, but to create a divisive atmosphere within your union, to find a way to crack that solidarity, to break up that unity, to create, again, divisiveness amongst you. If they can accomplish that, then they're well on their way to weakening or fracturing your union.
How much does it have to do with the CEO of the corporation?
It has literally everything to do with that level. It is that person who makes the decision whether or not to hire someone like I used to be, or a group performing the activities that I used to perform. It is that person that either adheres to or declines a recommendation made by someone like I used to be. It all falls in the lap of that chief executive or chief operating officer. That chairman of the board, that president, the person who has the final authority to make a decision. That is enemy number one. Enemy number two, and of an equal concern, is that elite group of terrorists, those people who are giving the advice and developing the strategy on an ongoing basis, those people who you have never met and never seen, who are behind the scenes gaining thousands of dollars an hour because they have the ear and they have the confidence of the man who is truly in the position to try to tear you apart.
Well, I think probably the most infamous example of that, or a group working for AMR, would be the 1990 and 91 apology ad that I'm sure most of us are familiar with. Just about all of us were hired by that time. And that ad was probably written by a firm such as this.
Oh, you could bet on it, and a lot of money was spent on that ad, and it was one of the components of the whole process. It was part of setting the stage. Nothing happens by accident when this obsession is going on to fracture a union. There are no coincidences. Every situation has been planned out and is part of the process. And when you see that clearly, when you realize that it didn't just happen, and that it's ongoing, and that it hasn't even reached its mid-level yet, then you'll start to understand the dynamics of why union busting is a very sick mentality.
I haven't read your book, which will be obvious maybe with this next question. But was there ever a union that you were hired to dismantle and you failed to do so?
Yeah, no, I'm not undefeated. In my 200 plus, call them campaigns, I lost 3.
Why did you do so?
That's why I'm saying I lost 3. Because I became an issue. See, in those instances, there were different variations, but my cloak of invisibility, that light of day, I was brought out. And I had some dirty laundry, which is aired in my book, and that was brought out. For example, the AFL-CIO has something they've been publishing for a number of years now. They call it the RUB sheet, and that stands for Report on Union Busters. And it's their way of getting to their affiliate unions information and updates on all of the people like I used to be. And I have some embarrassing moments in my past that they published. And some very smart organizers not only found out that I was there running the campaign, but brought this information in. That beat me. The other thing that beat me was solidarity.
Marty, one of the problems we got is the pilot group doesn't lend itself to unionism or union support. By nature, most of us are ex-military. Middle class or upper middle class, voted Republican in the past. How do you get around those institutional roadblocks? Because I know I was that way. I was vehemently anti-union.
There's no simple solution, but I guess you have to redefine what a union is for yourself. You know, it's like I said, and I know this sounds corny and maybe too basic and elementary, but, you know, just take the letter U and the letter I. You know, it's the heart and soul of union, and put it back into it. Many of you in this room probably know your history, or you wouldn't be part of this very intimate family awareness group and program. But you've got 9,000 or so people out there that if you really want to succeed in this mission, instead of, oh my God, what are we going to do if we strike? What color are our picket signs going to be and all this other crap? You better get back to the basics first. And, you know, again, forgive me if I seem overimposing, but until you and your union brothers and your union sisters understand what a union is, people like I used to be will chew you up and spit you out. No, powerful words can come from family, you know, and I applaud all of you and this whole family awareness program that you have. It's critical and viable to your union's success, as you well know, or you wouldn't have done it and you wouldn't be doing it. And it was said to me better than I can say it over coffee this morning. You know, you are pilots with a common goal, and a very worthwhile goal, that you can accomplish through a collective voice you couldn't accomplish individually. There isn't one of you in this room. Sure, you could cajole with Crandall, but your goals, if any of you tried to take them individually to where they had to get and accomplish them, you couldn't do it.
What do you see happening between this point and the end of the process, which of course, if it goes to the completion, would be a 30-day cooling off period? What can we expect out of management, and how can we react to that?
Well, you can expect the attacks to intensify. You can expect the company to more attempt to vilify the union, to more attempt to make you the bad guy, to make you greedy, to make all the problems that exist within the company the fault of the union, to attempt to take away any of your individual identities, to subliminally, where they can, use peripheral situations, whether it's the media, whatever might lend some credibility to the position that the company's the good guy and the union is the bad guy and the union is the cause of each and every problem that exists within the company. You'll see that accelerate, you'll see that intensify. You may see some of your fellow pilots set up in less than comfortable situations. There'll be efforts to divide you, there'll be efforts to discredit you. There'll be constant efforts to fault you for everything.
Marty, if there was one message you could leave with our membership, what would that be?
It would be not to lose sight that you are under attack, that war has been declared against your union, that you have to stay focused on what the true and real issues are, and that you have to maintain your unity. You keep that together, especially that unity, and there isn't a union buster out there that can beat you.
Well, thank you, Marty. I'd like to thank you for your time this morning during the presentation and for this interview. The two things that we can take away from Marty Levitt, I think he just mentioned: stay focused on the issues and stay unified. And